Thousands arrive in Hawaii on first day pre-travel testing. About 8,000 people landed in Hawaii on the first day of a pre-travel testing program that allowed travelers to come to the islands without quarantining for 2 weeks if they could produce a negative coronavirus test. Honolulu, AP. About 8,000 people landed in Hawaii on the first day of a pre-travel testing program that allowed travelers to come to the islands without quarantining for 2 weeks if they could produce a negative coronavirus test. Angela Margos was among the first passengers in San Francisco to get on a plane to Hawaii Thursday morning. Vacation, peace of mind, said Margos, a nurse from San Carlos, California, of why she's flying to Hawaii. I need time to relax, unwind. The new testing program is an effort to stem the devastating downturn the pandemic has had on Hawaii's tourism-based economy. Officials had touted the mandatory quarantine rule as an integral part of Hawaii's early success in keeping the coronavirus at bay. But gaps in the pre-travel testing program coupled with increasing cases of COVID-19 across the U.S. have raised questions about whether Hawaii is ready to safely welcome back vacationers. And when local restrictions were eased before summertime holidays, community spread of the disease spiked to alarming levels, forcing a second round of stay-at-home orders for residents and closures for non-essential businesses. Margos ran into hiccups with getting her test. She first did it at the hospital where she works, only to find out it wasn't an approved site for United Airlines and the state of Hawaii. She then paid $105 for a drive-through test, but she was later informed there was an error with that test. Margos ultimately paid $250 for a fast result test Thursday at the airport in San Francisco, which came back negative. Opponents of the testing program have said a single test 72 hours before arrival, especially when coupled with the option to fly without a test and still quarantine, is not enough to keep island residents safe. Kathleen Miyashita and her husband were among those who came to Hawaii Thursday without getting tested. They said they plan to quarantine at their family's farm on Oahu. We chose to do the 14-day quarantine, Miyashita said. We have no issues with having food being brought in. It's like a quarantining haven in terms of having fresh fruits and vegetables at home. She said she and her husband were not at all concerned about being asymptomatic carriers of the disease. We've been traveling, and we just take precautions, she said, adding that they had already done one quarantine in Hawaii about 2 months ago. Hawaii's economy is almost entirely built around tourism, and local families who rely on the sector to survive need to return to work. More than 100 of Hawaii's approximately 4,000 restaurants, bakeries, and caterers have closed permanently, and more than 50% predict they will not survive the coming months, officials have said. Monica Taguchi Ryan, whose family has owned and operated the Highway Inn restaurant on Oahu for over 70 years, said the lack of tourism has been crippling. The restaurant and service industry has suffered so much during this pandemic, Taguchi Ryan said. Restaurants have not received any federal relief since the spring and are struggling to pay their expenses. Some restaurants have closed entirely, unable to pay for their rent, food supplies, and staff wages. Taguchi Ryan joined Democratic Gov. David Ige on Wednesday to talk about a new restaurant debit card that will give some unemployed Hawaii residents $500 to spend at local restaurants over the next 60 days. The $75 million program is being funded by Federal CARES Act money and is aimed at stimulating the local economy. When restaurants like us have more customers, we buy more from our suppliers and we reinvest the money several times over in our local economy, Taguchi Ryan said. Hawaii, which has about 1.4 million residents, reported